Welcome to Revenge by Peta, where love turns cold, family turns cruel, and revenge quietly begins. On this channel, we bring you cinematic stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and justice served cold. From family secrets and toxic in-laws to shocking betrayals and karma delivered with precision. These are stories you'll never forget. We upload twice weekly, Wednesdays for love and betrayal stories and Sundays for family revenge tales. Every story is designed to captivate, reflect, and remind you. Revenge isn't evil. Sometimes it's balance. If you've ever been betrayed or know someone who has, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay tuned, and step into the world where silence speaks louder than vengeance.
It all started when the door clicked shut behind me, and for a moment, I expected the familiar warmth of Lucas' presence to follow the creak of the floor, smell of his cologne triggering memory flashbacks. But there was nothing, just silence thick enough to press against my chest. The faint scent of his cologne lingered, sweet and comforting, yet it only made his absence sharper. 12 years of shared mornings, quiet laughter over coffee, whispered promises across dimly lit rooms, all vanished in a single, inexplicable moment. My fingers trembled as they hovered over the keys I had just dropped on the counter. Steam rose from my untouched coffee, curling into the empty air like smoke from a distant, burning past. I searched the apartment as if familiarity could anchor me. His slippers neatly aligned, the coat rack still holding his jacket, the bed perfectly made, but each step only confirmed it. He was gone. No note, no call, no explanation. My phone buzzed with mundane notifications. Nothing from him. Nothing to explain 12 years of life suddenly erased. My breath caught in my throat, and my mind refused to focus. How can someone vanish completely after building a life together? I sank onto the couch, the world outside muted, leaving only the echo of memories in my ears. And in that suffocating quiet, I whispered to the empty apartment. 12 years of love, then suddenly, he was gone. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, the truth of them heavier than I could bear. And yet, beneath the grief, beneath the disbelief, a small, stubborn ember of clarity flickered. Something in me told me this wasn't just disappearance. It was a beginning, a moment that would change everything, a fracture in the life I had trusted, one that I could not ignore. The story of betrayal was about to unfold, and I would have to watch it with my own eyes. How can someone vanish completely after 12 years? I had no idea the truth was waiting upstairs. The apartment, once warm and familiar, now felt alien. I moved slowly through each room, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight, echoes bouncing back at me like unanswered questions. A faint perfume lingered, soft, floral, not mine, not his usual scent. My stomach knotted, dread prickling at the edges of my thoughts. Could it be? Could someone else have entered his life while I slept, oblivious to the warning signs I now wished I had seen? I glanced at his laptop left open on the kitchen counter, and my heart lurched as a message notification flashed before disappearing instantly. The realization landed in my chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to deny it, to convince myself I was imagining shadows where there were none, but the signs were undeniable. Something had changed, and it wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. I sank into the couch, clutching a cushion cataloging each betrayal, noticing patterns of Lucas' arrogance at work and home as if it could shield me from the storm building inside. Memories of 12 years flashed through my mind. The quiet mornings, the late-night conversations, the laughter that had once filled these very walls. And yet, each memory now carried a bitter undertone, a haunting question. Had I truly known him, or only the version of him he allowed me to see? I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing, whispering to myself to hold on to reason. Betrayal rarely announces itself with fanfare. It creeps in quietly, unnoticed until it has already taken root. And now it had. Shadows of betrayal had entered the sanctuary I had called home, and I was left alone, watching the life I knew unravel. The days that followed were slow and suffocating. I moved through them like a ghost in my own life, watching Lucas from a distance, noting every subtle shift. His smiles, once reserved for me alone, lingered too long at his phone. Hushed phone calls were taken in corners, voices low and deliberate. Every deleted message, every delayed reply, every fleeting glance seemed a secret kept from me, and my chest ached with the weight of realization. I became an observer, painfully aware of each small betrayal, cataloging them silently. I replayed past conversations in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. Was it the sudden detachment at dinner? The lingering tension during shared errands? Each moment I had shrugged off now screamed with a clarity I could not ignore. Betrayal was no longer hypothetical. It was real, and I was standing at the edge of it, staring into the abyss of 12 years of trust eroding before my eyes. Evenings became the hardest. Alone in the dim light of our apartment, I could almost hear the echo of his absence. My reflection in the window stared back at me, a mixture of disbelief and quiet anger mirrored in my own eyes. How could someone I had loved so deeply, entrusted with my life, unravel everything without warning? The slow crawl of suspicion tightened its grip. I felt my heart harden just enough to survive, while my mind raced ahead, searching for the truth. One thing was clear. I could not remain passive. I had to know, to see with my own eyes, or else the betrayal would consume me entirely. That night, I lit a single candle in the living room, its soft glow casting dancing shadows across the walls. The apartment, once full of warmth, now felt like a stage set for confrontation with reality. And in that quiet, I introduced myself to the silence, to the woman I had temporarily forgotten amid the chaos of love and trust. "My name is Abigail," I whispered, my voice trembling yet steady. "I've loved Lucas for 12 years. I trusted him, believed in us. And now, I need to see the truth, no matter how painful it is." Saying my name aloud grounded me. I was no longer merely heartbroken. I was present, aware, ready to face what had been hidden from me. Naming myself gave me control over the storm that threatened to drown me. The candlelight reflected in the glass, painting me twice. One image of pain, one of quiet strength. For the first time, I understood the depth of my own resilience. The betrayal that awaited me would be faced, catalogued, and survived. Patience would be my weapon. Observation my shield. And somewhere beneath the ache, beneath the uncertainty, I felt the first spark of strategy form. I closed my eyes and let the silence speak, listening for the truths it would reveal. Betrayal had arrived, but it would not define me. I was Abigail. I was aware. And the story was far from over. Morning brought light that did nothing to ease the ache in my chest. I watched him, Lucas, across the breakfast table, noting the way his attention drifted. Not toward me, but toward messages on his phone, glances that lingered longer than they should. Another woman's name, another secret, another fracture in the life I thought we had built together. The betrayal was no longer subtle. It was deliberate, calculated, and heartbreaking. I forced a smile, moving through the motions, heart hammering with anger and disbelief. Every small gesture, every diverted gaze, was a reminder that the man I loved had chosen another path without a word. My mind catalogued it all. The silence, the deception, the deliberate omission of truth. The pain burned, but clarity began to form amid the ashes of heartbreak. Betrayal, I realized, thrived not only in actions but in indifference. He did not deny it. He did not defend me. The choice was his, and his silence confirmed the fracture that could never be repaired. 12 years of shared life, laughter, and trust had been quietly replaced with lies and shadows. I sat back, chest tight, watching the life I had thought I knew unravel. And yet, beneath the ache, a resolve began to grow. I would not crumble. I would not vanish. Patience and strategy would guide me, and someday the scales of justice would balance. Thursday morning started like any other, with sunlight spilling across the kitchen tiles and coffee brewing softly in the background. But when I opened my banking app, the world shifted violently. $10 million. My savings, painstakingly accumulated over the years, were gone. My heart stuttered, disbelief and anger clashing violently. The transfer had gone straight to his family, and Lucas' calm voice explained it as though it were ordinary. It's for them. It's family. I forced myself to breathe, cataloging not just his words but the absence behind them. 12 years reduced to a single syllable. Family. Family. That one word hit me harder than any punch. 12 years of trust, care, and shared dreams reduced to numbers he moved at will. My chest tightened, and a sharp ache spread across my shoulders. How could he justify this? How could he, the man I had loved so deeply, act with such cold calculation? Betrayal had evolved from shadows to tangible theft. Every sacrifice I had made, every effort to build a life together, suddenly felt like a naive gamble I had lost. I stared at the screen, replaying our years together in my mind. The trips, the quiet nights at home, the way he used to smile when I read aloud or made him laugh. It was all gone, swept away by a single act of greed and disregard. Tears threatened, but I refused to give them space. Instead, I let anger simmer quietly, sharpening my resolve. Betrayal was a knife, and though it had pierced me, I was still capable of precision. As I sat at the table, sipping cold coffee, I realized this theft revealed more than his disregard for me. It revealed his priorities, his character. And character, once exposed, could be used against him. My mind, though bruised, began to map the possibilities. Patience, observation, careful action, these would be my allies. And somewhere deep down, a quiet fire of determination ignited. $10 million. And Lucas' explanation only made the knife twist deeper. I confronted him that evening, steadying my voice though my hands shook. Lucas, the money. Why? My words were calm, though my heart roared beneath the surface. He leaned back casually, as if my inquiry were trivial. His charm polished, practiced. It's family, he said again, shrugging with deliberate indifference. No apology. No hesitation. Just that single word, delivered like a hammer to my chest. 12 years of trust and partnership, dismissed with casual ease. I wanted to scream, to shatter the calm surface he projected, but instead I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to breathe, to think. Betrayal often thrives when met with outrage. It weakens you if you react impulsively. My silence, my observation was my weapon. As he spoke about obligations to his mother and siblings, I realized the full scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just the stolen money. It was the hierarchy of loyalty he had placed above me. 12 years of partnership mattered less than appearances, less than tradition, less than convenience. Every shared dream now felt fragile, undermined by his choices. I let him continue, cataloging every word, every pause, every subtle smirk that revealed arrogance. Patience, I reminded myself. Observation. Strategy. He had underestimated me, and that would be his undoing. I would not allow grief to dictate my actions. I would allow clarity to guide them. The next day, his mother appeared unannounced, her smile precise, her eyes sharp. She did not greet me with warmth, only scrutiny. "You're only after his money," she said, the words slicing through the morning air. Lucas, standing silently beside her, nodded subtly, offering no defense. 12 years of shared life, memories, and loyalty, dismissed in a single motion, reduced to greed in the eyes of the one I trusted most. The room felt smaller, suffocating, the sunlight unable to pierce the judgment that surrounded me. I felt invisible, my presence dismissed, my love devalued. Every word, every look, carried the weight of betrayal multiplied by alliance. He had sided with her, as though my existence, my sacrifices were irrelevant. I wanted to cry, but I refused. My mind raced, cataloging the emotional wounds, noting the patterns, identifying the weaknesses. Betrayal is always louder when the betrayer enlists others to affirm it. But while their voices rose in judgment, a quiet flame kindled within me. I would not be crushed by the weight of their assumptions. Instead, I would survive, and in time I would reclaim not only my dignity but everything he had tried to take. Sitting alone later that night, I traced my thoughts on paper, mapping emotions, facts, and possible courses of action. Betrayal, I realized, reveals more than the deceiver. It reveals opportunities. And the strongest form of revenge is strategic, inevitable, and delivered silently. Night fell, and the apartment became my sanctuary once more. I lit a candle, watching shadows sway across the walls, each movement a mirror of my tangled emotions. Pain, disbelief, anger, they all lingered, but underneath it clarity emerged. I whispered to the darkened room, reaffirming my existence. I am Abigail. I am not powerless. I will survive. I will reclaim everything. Saying my name aloud gave form to my resolve. Betrayal, I realized, could be met with despair or strategy. Chose strategy. I began cataloging every interaction, every subtle hint, every misstep from Lucas. Observation would become my shield. Patience my sword. Every detail mattered. The faint smile at a message, the lingering glance at another woman, the casual shrug when confronted. Each moment was a thread, weaving a pattern that I would understand before acting. I imagined the long path ahead, the slow accumulation of justice that would restore what had been stolen. Revenge would not be loud, it would not be impulsive. It would be inevitable, precise, and undeniable. My heart ached, but my mind was sharp. 12 years of love had taught me resilience, and now that strength would be my guide. In the days that followed, I became a quiet observer of life that had once felt mine. Lucas moved through spaces I once shared as if he owned them entirely. But now I watched, cataloging. His attention to messages, the subtle hints of another presence in his life, and the occasional smirk at a private joke I was excluded from. It all revealed arrogance and weakness. Pain remained, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but my focus sharpened. Betrayal had unveiled a map of his character, and I traced it carefully, noting each flaw, each moment of vulnerability he failed to mask. He underestimated me, assuming grief would make me passive, assuming heartbreak would make me blind. Instead, I learned to wait, to see clearly, to plan. Evenings became my reflection time. Candlelight, coffee, and silence allowed me to process the emotional layers. Loss, deception, and disappointment. I reminded myself constantly that patience was the ultimate tool. Observation would allow me to predict, and in time, act with precision. The first 2 betrayals had shaken me to the core, but in that stillness, I began to feel something new. Quiet power. One day, he would realize he had underestimated the woman he had betrayed. and by then it would be too late. It was a Saturday morning, sunlight spilling lazily across the bed. I was making tea when the phone rang. Flight. To where? For how long? And the silence that followed was louder than any answer. Not mine. Lucas had forgotten his phone at home. It was Maya. Again. I remembered the whispers at work, the deals that seemed off, the promotions bypassed for people he barely knew. His betrayal wasn't confined to home. It bled into every office corridor, every boardroom. This was bigger than us. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I didn't speak, but I heard her voice, soft and playful. Don't forget our flight tonight, babe. My world froze. Flight. To where? For how long? The call ended and I stood there, holding his phone like a weapon, staring at the screen until his wallpaper, our smiling photo, felt like mockery. When he returned that evening, I asked calmly, "How was work?" He smiled, kissed my forehead, and lied with ease. "Long day, Abby. You wouldn't have survived." And then I knew. He wasn't coming home to rest anymore. He was coming home to cover his tracks. That night, I sat outside under the streetlight, the one that always flickered between light and darkness. And I realized that's exactly what love had become. Flickering. And steady. Slowly dying. I met her by accident. It was a Friday evening, a charity gala hosted by Lucas' company. I wore a simple black dress. She wore red. Her laughter was the kind that didn't belong to strangers. It belonged to someone who had been invited in. She walked up to us, confident, radiant, and extended her hand. "Hi, I'm Maya." For a second, the world stopped spinning. Lucas' fingers tightened around my waist, but his eyes, they betrayed him. They flinched. I shook her hand, my smile practiced. "Abigail," I said. "Lucas' wife." The silence that followed was long enough to suffocate a room. All night, I watched her from across the hall. How she laughed at his jokes, how he avoided my gaze. And I understood. Sometimes, the woman you fear most isn't hidden in shadows. She's standing in the light, wearing your husband's favorite color. When we got home, I asked him quietly, "How long?" He didn't answer. And silence became my answer. I thought things couldn't get worse, until his mother came to visit. She sat in my living room, her perfume heavy and cold. "Abigail," she began, "you've changed my son. You've distracted him with your ambitions." I stayed calm. "I built those ambitions for us," I said. She laughed. "Us? You mean for yourself? You've been using him." Later that night, Lucas confronted me. "You embarrassed my mother," he said. I blinked, stunned. "By defending myself," he shouted for the first time in our marriage. "She thinks you're after my money." I wanted to scream, to remind him of the nights I stayed up helping him start his business, of the accounts I managed, the debts I cleared. But instead I said nothing. Because how do you fight when love becomes an accusation? The next morning, I found that he had moved $10 million from our joint account. No explanation. Just gone. That's when I realized. The theft wasn't just of money. It was of trust. We were supposed to renew our vows that month. 12 years. Small ceremony. Just close friends and family. I remember standing in the fitting room, staring at the wedding gown. Soft ivory, delicate lace, the kind that promises forever. My best friend Clara was helping me adjust the veil. But something about her eyes felt off, distant, guilty. That night she called me. Her voice shook. "Abby," she said, "I didn't mean for this to happen." I frowned. "What happened?" She broke down. "Lucas, it was a mistake." For a moment I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. I just listened to the sound of something dying inside me. my fiancé, my husband of 12 years, had slept with my best friend. The night before our vow renewal, I sat in the dark until morning, holding my wedding dress in my lap like a ghost of promises that never lived. He came home expecting chaos. He got silence. No tears. No shouting. Just me sitting by the window, calm as a storm that's already passed. "Abby," he began, "I can explain." I smiled faintly. "You don't need to. I heard enough." He moved closer, his eyes softening with false guilt. "It didn't mean anything." And I said, "Then neither do I." He froze. For the first time, Lucas had nothing to say. I stood, packed a single suitcase, and walked out. No words, no backward glance. Only the sound of my heels echoing in the hallway. When I reached the door, I turned and said the last thing he ever heard from me. "You didn't lose me, Lucas. You threw me away." Outside, the rain began to fall. Gentle, almost merciful. And I realized, healing doesn't start when you leave. It starts when you stop waiting for an apology that will never come. The first morning after I left felt like learning to breathe again. The city outside was loud, horns, footsteps, life. But inside my small rented apartment, there was only silence. It didn't feel lonely. It felt empty, the kind of emptiness that waits to be filled with something new. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee I couldn't afford and watched the sunrise. For years, I had watched that same sun from a mansion built on lies. Now it was mine alone, no shadows attached. My phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls from Lucas. No messages that said sorry. Only, "Let's talk." I deleted them all. By noon I called my lawyer. I wanted my name removed from every joint account, every property, every shadow that tied me to him. That was the beginning of my rebuilding. Not money. Not revenge. Boundaries. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waiting for footsteps at the door. And I realized that healing doesn't start with forgiveness. Starts with distance. Took 6 months. 6 long months of legal calls, paperwork, and meetings I didn't want to attend. But I did. Quietly. Consistently. Lucas had transferred $10 million to his family. I had proof. Every transaction, every signature. And I wasn't going to let silence make me a victim anymore. I remember sitting in the courtroom, dressed in gray. Boys. Lucas sat across from me. His mother whispering behind him. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. The judge's voice echoed. "Mrs. Abigail Lawson is hereby granted restitution of her assets and awarded full compensation." I didn't smile. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just justice wearing quiet shoes. Outside, I walked past Lucas without a word. He turned slightly, as if wanting to speak. But the silence between us had become sacred, untouchable. With the settlement money restored, I didn't rush to rebuild my old life. Built something new. I started a wellness foundation for women, those who had given too much of themselves and were now learning to take it back. I spoke at small gatherings, quietly sharing pieces of my story without mentioning names. People started calling me the Phoenix Woman. But inside, I wasn't chasing symbolism. I was chasing peace. Each morning, I wrote a letter to myself that began with, "You did not lose love. You lost delusion." By year 2, my foundation grew into something larger. Sponsorships, investors, partnerships. My strength had become my brand. And Lucas, he was fading into rumor. It was ironic, almost cruelly poetic. Lucas married Clara, my former best friend. The woman who once held my bouquet now wore my ring. And yet, neither of them understood. You can steal someone's love but never their peace. The photos circulated online. Perfect smiles. Perfect poses. But even through the camera's lens I could see it, that flicker in his eyes. Regret. People said he had changed. I knew better. Some people don't change. They just switch their victims. Months later, a mutual friend told me Clara had left him. No warning, no message. Just gone. Apparently, he had drained her account too. I didn't laugh. I didn't even feel satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of balance, like the universe had exhaled. His name was Daniel. A quiet man with kind eyes and a patience that felt foreign after years of chaos. We met at a conference in Boston. He didn't know who I was, and that's what I loved most. He didn't see the woman who lost 10 million or the wife of a scandal. He saw a woman laughing over bad coffee. For months I tried to resist. Love felt dangerous, fragile. But one night, sitting by the fireplace, he said something that shattered every wall I had built. You don't need to be healed to be loved. You just need to be willing to begin again. That night I let myself begin. When he held my hand, it didn't feel like possession. Felt like peace. And I realized sometimes revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about living so fully that they become irrelevant. 3 years passed like a lifetime. The headlines had long forgotten my name, but his had started to reappear. This time, not in celebration. Former CEO Lucas Grant under investigation for fraud. I read the words twice before folding the newspaper carefully, almost reverently. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like closure finding its own way back home. Later that week, an envelope arrived at my office. Elegant, cream-colored, sealed with his family crest. Inside was a letter, handwritten in the same neat penmanship that once wrote me love notes on coffee napkins. Abigail, I need to see you. Please. One last time. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. Because a part of me, the part that once loved him beyond reason, wanted to see how time had treated his soul. 3 nights later, another message came. A dinner invitation. At the restaurant where we first met. Life has a cruel sense of symmetry. The restaurant hadn't changed. Still dimly lit, still smelling faintly of aged wine and regret. Lucas arrived late. He looked older, thinner, worn. His suit hung loose, like he no longer fit inside the life he once built. He smiled weakly. You look incredible. I didn't smile back. You look like someone I used to know. He lowered his gaze. I deserve that. There was silence, the kind that remembers too much. He told me he had lost his position, his properties, and his so-called friends. Even his mother had stopped answering his calls. He reached across the table. Abby, I miss you. I made mistakes. I leaned back calm. You didn't make mistakes, Lucas. You made choices. His eyes glistened, but I didn't flinch. Because love doesn't disappear. It evolves into understanding. And in that moment, I understood that I didn't hate him anymore. I simply pitied him. When I left, I paid for both our meals. It wasn't kindness. It was closure. A month after that dinner, the news broke. Lucas was arrested for embezzlement. The same reckless greed that once bled our marriage now bled his company dry. The footage played everywhere. His head bowed, surrounded by flashing cameras. Once, seeing him broken would have thrilled me. Now, it only reminded me of what survival looks like when you choose power over love. The same journalist who once interviewed us as the power couple called me for a statement. I declined. Some stories don't need words. Silence says enough. That evening, Daniel poured me a glass of wine. He said softly, "You okay?" He nodded. Better than ever. We toasted. Not to revenge, not to victory, but to peace that costs nothing and means everything. A year later I found another letter. This one came from the prison. It was from Lucas. His handwriting shaky, the tone strangely humble. He wrote, "I finally understand what I destroyed. Me. If you ever think of me, I hope it's not with hate." I folded the letter and walked to the mirror. 4 years that reflection had been a battlefield, between who I was and who he made me. Now it was simply me. I lit a candle, held the letter over the flame, and watched it burn slowly, curling into ash. No anger, no sorrow, just release. Behind me, Daniel wrapped his arms around my shoulders. He whispered, "It's over now." And I realized, it had been over for a long time. I just needed to see the ashes. Strange how life comes full circle. The same world that once watched me fall now watches me stand. Taller, quieter, stronger. I spoke at a conference last month, sharing my journey. Not as a victim but as a survivor. When the applause faded, a woman approached me, tears in her eyes. She said, "You gave me courage to leave." And in that moment, I knew everything had been worth it. Lucas's story ended in silence. Mine began there. I still wear no ring, but my heart is full. Daniel and I travel often, laugh often, and live gently. And sometimes when the wind feels just right, I whisper into it, "Thank you for leaving, Lucas. You set me free." The screen fades to black. Then my calm voice returns, low, reflective, haunting. I had learned that survival is quiet, revenge is strategic, and peace comes not from taking back, but from refusing to be stolen from again. Thanks for watching. You're watching Revenge by Peta, where silence speaks louder than vengeance.
Thank you for watching Revenge by Peta. Remember, in a world of deceit and betrayal, justice doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any cinematic tale of love gone cold or family betrayal. Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember, revenge is not about hate, it's about restoring balance. This was Revenge by Peta, where silence speaks louder than vengeance.